What conditions must be true to ensure that all children are safe, healthy, and successful in this community, especially children of color and children living in poverty? In the early part of 2015, I was part of the Ferguson Commission's subcommittee on education equity and school innovation. We sought to address that question. Our section of the report, ultimately titled Youth at the Center, has the most calls to action and the least clear lines of accountability. 3 years after the release of the report, we've seen only incremental change toward the St. Louis we imagined. One of the calls to action where no progress has been made was the call to form an education design and financing task force. That task force would be charged with developing a design that served all children and a financing model that supported equity and innovation. As a member of the subcommittee, I imagined a redesign of education, learning reimagined, if you will. And I've thought a lot about that since those 3 years have passed. So what conditions would need to be true? First, it's got to be big, bold infrastructure for all. I believe that public education is a public utility, not a commodity. Our community benefits greatly from the support of an educated public. It's our responsibility to provide that to all children. Second, I believe that public education must prepare our young people to be successful citizens. It should set them up for success in careers and also support their understanding of the world they're about to enter. It is in our region's best interest to ensure that public education is the premier talent pipeline from preschool through to jobs. Third, I believe that the system must serve young people as well as it serves adults. Education reform often pits students against educators and the comfort of politicians against the comfort of families. We've got to stop that. We need an abundance mentality that keeps youth at the center. And my final requirement comes from the words of the Ferguson Commission's call. The design must clearly address the integration of schools. This is so radical. St. Louis has never clearly addressed the integration of schools. Thanks to our institutionalized housing segregation, we've been going to school, living, and working separately for 100 years. Despite Brown v. Board of Ed's ruling in 1954, St. Louis didn't take substantive steps to integrate until 1983. And that was through the transfer program that allowed a few thousand black students to attend predominantly white schools and a few hundred white students to attend St. Louis public magnets. And yet research shows that integrated classrooms have a positive effect on the academic achievement of poor students and students of color. At the height of the nation's desegregation efforts in 1988, the education gap between black students and white students shrunk to 18%, down from a high of 40% in the 70s. And then we, white people, started to move away from those segregated, or from those integrated schools, and the achievement gap went back. In the way that St. Louis is currently structured, integration is not possible. We have 23 public school districts in St. Louis County, 1 public school district in the city, plus charters. And the demographics of each are extremely varied, with no one district able to have more than one group making up the supermajority. It's quite rare to have that. And yet, in the aggregate, the opportunities for integration start to open. If you put all 178,000 students in our public education system into one demographic group, we see that integration really is possible. We have about half of our public school children eligible for free or reduced price lunch, an imperfect but widely used measure of poverty. Racially, our student body is about 40% black and 50% white. So it gets me thinking. If we do this in the aggregate, we could do integration. And so everyone's got to opt in, and I would propose we do a unified metropolitan school district with a commitment to integration at the school building level. We take for granted that rich kids in this community get to travel for their best fit education. Families of means send their kids to MICDS, Burroughs, Whitfield. And those public education institutions, or those private education institutions, have established a reputation and a specialization that attracts certain kinds of kids. Poor kids, on the other hand, are expected to just go to school in their communities, regardless of if the program is a good fit for them or plays to their strengths. If we embraced as a region that traveling for your best fit school is the norm, then regional building level integration could be possible. Families could certainly preference their neighborhood school, but they could also select a school based on the curriculum, STEM, performing arts, experiential learning. It's an opportunity to reimagine education in a way that we haven't done before. So, what's holding us back? Tradition. St. Louis is often asked, where did you go to high school? It's a fragmentation that many folks lean into, and while there's pride in being a U-City Lion, some folks use that fragmentation to exploit the segregation of our community. They have had the opportunity to have access to more affluent, more exclusive, more expensive schools, and that makes them feel special. We celebrate that Brentwood achieves 100% on their annual performance metrics, and that Metro, Clayton, and Ladue were recognized as US News' best public high schools, while we ignore that neighboring districts are struggling to maintain accreditation and graduate their students with options. Money is holding us back. Local school districts are funded by and large by local taxpayers. We have 24 different districts with 24 different tax rates, all that are set by the voters in that district. We couldn't just mash all of those things together and even it out. It would take some serious will, expertise, and frankly, time to figure it out. In addition, our state has an extremely complicated funding formula that would certainly be impacted by a consolidated school district. So we'd need our state legislators and state education officials on board as well. And we'd potentially be messing with people's paychecks. There is about a $7,000 difference between starting pay in our most modest and our most generous school districts currently. Add to that each school district handles professional development, benefits, and other perks in their own unique way. There would be a lot of smoothing out that would need to be done, and it could get extremely tricky. power is holding us back. St. Louis is in love with local control. Our 24 school districts have no fewer than 160 school board members. Each of those folks elected by their community and spending countless hours learning the intricacies of their district. A consolidated school district would certainly disrupt those bastions of power. And yet, local control doesn't really mean anything if you don't have the resources to be responsive to your constituents. The case in many of our local districts. But there are glimmers of hope that this is possible. Missouri does school district consolidation. In fact, there is a rule on the books that districts smaller than 350 students must merge. So think about how that could work when districts could bring resources to the table. I mean, if those tiny rural districts can do it, can't we? St. Louis also, once upon a time, did something innovative and special for a group of students who the traditional public school system wasn't serving. In 1957, St. Louis County voters established the St. Louis Special School District to serve students with disabilities and pool the resources of our best educators to do that work. It began with about 200 students and today serves more than 20,000 students, regardless of where they live in St. Louis County. It gives me hope that St. Louis can move past its fragmentation and do something really big and bold that's right for kids. Let's not wait for our own Hurricane Katrina. Let's not wait for another district to lose accreditation and become on the brink of bankruptcy because of transfer. Let's do something truly proactive and innovative that is in the best interest of students. Let's form a unified metropolitan school district with intentional building level integration so that all of our students succeed.